Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I'm Nate.
And I'm Adam.
And today we are talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem.
Woo!
Roughly the 46th Ninja Turtle movie in the last
something like that
20 years, give or take a few. But this one, at least, I was interested in coming into it. One, because it's animated and it has a cool looking animation style. And two, because the people involved, produced by Seth Rogen, directed by Jeff Rowe or Rowe, not sure how to pronounce that last name, but the director of Mitchells vs. the Machines. So it felt like there was a better creative group behind this than what we've seen lately. So before we get into the review, Adam, would you like to tell the people what Mutant Mayhem is about?
Absolutely. After years of being sheltered from the human world, the Turtle Brothers set out to win the hearts of New Yorkers and be accepted as normal teenagers through heroic acts. Their new friend, April O'Neil, helps them take on a mysterious crime syndicate, but they soon get in over their heads when an army of mutants is unleashed upon them. Bum, bum, bum.
All right. So, diving in, Adam, you a big Ninja Turtle fan?
Not necessarily. I feel like I missed the boat a little bit when I was a kid. It was either too early or too late for me, or I think it just didn't really grab my attention. I had a couple friends who were huge Ninja Turtle fans, but it never quite stuck for me. Obviously, I caught a lot of cartoons and stuff that were on TV. I just never watched a ton of TMNT at that point. I'm kind of beholden to my brother's, my older brother's tastes, and then my younger sister's tastes. I just kind of floated in between. So I know. What about you?
Yeah, I was definitely. I watched a lot of the 80s animated series, and then my brother and I watched the first two movies, especially of that 90s trilogy, I guess you can call it.
Yeah.
Just over and over again. There are still lines from those movies that we quote to each other, and we will have Adam and I did watch those as well, so we will look out for an episode in the coming days where we discuss the first and second of the 90s movies as well. That was a lot of fun because you had never seen those, but
I had not.
Yeah, to get back to Mutant, and I've just kind of felt like, I mean, part of it is because those are the movies I grew up with, but also it's just really felt like all the sort of live action ones that they've tried to do since have featured like bad CGI. I know Michael Bay made one in there, who I'm just generally not a fan of his movies. This was the first time where I was genuinely kind of excited to see one. And I do think a large part of it is because they went back to having it be animated.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, this movie works. It's pretty fun. Although you and I had a very loud laugher near us that
dude,
that made it a little difficult to kind of stay in the movie. I mean, look, it's got some good jokes. It's got some laughs. It's got some jokes that don't quite land, a little more hit than miss, but definitely some misses on the jokes. And roughly every 30 to 60 seconds, this guy was belting out like the loudest laugh, like everything he saw was the funniest thing he'd ever experienced. And I don't necessarily, I mean, I'm glad the guy enjoyed the movie.
Me too.
But it did make it kind of hard. He was sitting like two seats to your right, wasn't he?
Yeah. It made it hard to laugh at the things that were actually funny.
Right.
Because he was just like, ha ha. Like, it was just like, what are we doing? Like every time somebody came on screen, ha ha. And it was like, that's not supposed to be a joke. It's just moving the movie along. It was kind of frustrating, but I originally thought, I was like, you know what, he's probably like 8 years old, like who cares, you know, whatever. And I looked over later and I'm pretty sure he was like 16. There was no parents around. It was just him and a couple buddies, and I was like, that's a tough look. You're either on a bunch of drugs, which also unfortunate because you're 16, or you're just that way, which more power to you, my guy, but woof. It was a difficult experience.
Made parts of it a little tough, but I do think for the most part the humor works. The camaraderie between the four brothers, I think, is probably the most successful part of the movie. They cast real teenagers who have some credits out there but aren't really well known for anything. I don't think. And
I don't think so either. They did record. They did make them record in the same space, which I think.
Yeah, you can tell too, because like the way the conversation, they talk over each other a lot. Which, first off, just a lot of people do that anyway. But especially teenagers who are close.
I think friends.
They're just always, that's what I mean. They're always talking over each other, and for the most part, like the sound is good enough where you can generally hear whoever you choose to like want to listen to when that's happening. So I think the movie works best when it's those four on screen and they're just kind of bickering and bantering and giving each other shit and kind of going quickly from taking very serious energy to something important that they're trying to accomplish to taking the same amount of, they're just kind of doing silly things like getting groceries and trying to cut a watermelon in half with a sword.
Yeah.
It like the energy for them is always really high, and they're able to apply it in different ways. And I think that's also pretty representative as well. So I think that's the biggest strength of the movie. That, along with the animation style being very interesting to look at, and a killer soundtrack.
Yeah, I thought the soundtrack was awesome. It's interesting because this is the first. I mean, they've made 2 or 3 TMNTs since like 2020. I want to say like there was like a 2016 and like a 2013, and even like a 2008 one.
There was Megan Fox was in somewhere between like 1 and 4 of those.
Yeah, and I don't know anything really about those, but this one clearly leaned into the fact that like the people who like TMNT are our age now. So they played a lot of like 90s songs. They played a lot of stuff that like we're going to notice, and kids today might be like, oh, I know of that song. Like my parents played it or something. But they're not really going to like understand where that's coming from. So the soundtrack was really cool. I thought the animation was good, although it did kind of put me off. Like nothing looks amazing, but it's the style of it. Like the humans don't look like your average. I wouldn't say average, but your like clean cut animated style humans. They've got different proportions. Their faces look funny, that sort of thing. Kind of like a Rick and Morty, if you're going for that vibe, but kind of an irreverent, but kind of weird, grotesque.
Yeah, they're not going for photorealism here.
Yeah,
it sort of reminded me, like you and I mentioned, like a couple like 90s, early 2000s Nickelodeon cartoons. Like I thought of Invader Zim.
Yeah, very Invader Zim.
And like As Told by Ginger, I'm not quite sure why that one crossed my mind.
And like Hey Arnold with the way the city kind of looks.
Yeah, like Rocket Power. We're just listing off like Nickelodeon shows now, but
it's a bunch of those like mixed into one.
I thought it was cool that it evoked that, like those memories for me. And it's an interesting balance where, like you already mentioned, how the people who grew up with this are our age, but they also need people who are like teenagers and like maybe between the ages of like 10 and 18 or like 8 and 18 to like really want to see this as well for it to be successful.
Yeah.
And the teenagers feel like teenagers, like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles feel like teenagers, and they speak in a way that's very now.
Yes.
With a lot of like modern day slang. There's a video, like a promotional video on YouTube of Seth Rogen and Ice Cube trying to guess what a slang word means.
Okay.
And then like the 4 teenagers have to explain to them like what half of them actually mean. That's effective, but it's an interesting balancing act where they're able to basically kind of make the characters and the story feel very present, while the stuff around it, like the animation style and the soundtrack, are there to kind of pull in people who are our age.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's a good balancing act of being able to honor the audience you currently have and also try to bring in a new audience in a way that's, actually, I think, gonna work. You're not being like, oh, remember back in the day when we had Master Splinter doing these types of things, or like he looked this way. It's like, no, he's much more like dad now. He's not so much of like old wise like sensei. He's just like it's dad who takes care of his boys because he found them and he loves them.
Yeah, what do you think of Jackie Chan as Master Splinter?
Or I love Jackie
Papa
Chan.
Splinter.
Yeah, Papa Splinter. I love Jackie Chan and like everything. So I think that was a great choice. I was a little surprised that they made him like a little bit more of like a portly rat. Obviously, he's dad, but he's like pretty thick. And he does a little bit of fighting and stuff.
He's got the dad bod going for sure. Yeah,
which I'm sure Jackie Chan like modeled about. Like it was like, all right, we're gonna do this. Yeah. And he likes to use chairs in his movies, and there's a scene with him on like a swivel chair, which I thought was great. During a fight. I enjoyed him. I really like Jackie Chan, and I love the scene. There's a text that gets sent out, like there's an emergency at home. Like that whole scene after that, I thought was pretty funny. So,
oh yeah, that whole bit was good. And then the other one I wanted to touch on was Io Adebiri as April, because April in this movie is a teenager, just like the Turtles are, and she writes for her school paper and is trying to kind of get the big scoop to sort of increase her popularity at school after some not so great things have happened to her.
Yeah.
So they all kind of team up to sort of fight. It's Ice Cube, right? Who's voicing
Ice Cube
who's voicing Superfly, who's the main villain here, not Shredder. So it's interesting that they just kind of went the full mutant route, which I think generally works. And also, if it's successful and you want to do a sequel, then you got Shredder.
Then you got Shredder.
There.
Yep.
Yeah. Kind of like the new Batman movie where they sort of left the Joker, or a lot of them seem to like leave the Joker for like movie 2 or 3, the next one. Yeah.
Because he's the big villain and all that. Like, that's the thing everybody knows. So you might as well go for like some little stuff and get people pulled in and be like, look what we can actually do without this giant thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought he was good. Like just kind of a sort of fun cast of other mutants, often voiced by very famous people, which just kind of gives them it makes them slightly more memorable than they otherwise would have been, I think, given that they have such limited screen time. Like Rose Byrne as like an Australian alligator, Leatherhead.
Yep.
If that was just a random person and I wasn't watching the movie and going like, oh, that's Rose Byrne, I probably wouldn't have remembered anything that Leatherhead did.
It'd be cool.
Exactly. Yeah. So in one ways that kind of pulls you out when you're like, God, I know that voice. But in another way, it sort of helps to kind of give each of the villains that gets like 6 total lines, like kind of their own voice and helps them stand out a little bit.
Absolutely. There's also, so they have a huge cast of these folks. They also included obviously the boys that we talked about are fairly new to movies. They've got a couple credits and stuff, but I think all the young cast did very well. Obviously the cast of stars is great, but there's 2, I guess, like new-ish people to movies in here. Mr. Beast, a huge YouTuber, Jimmy Donaldson. He plays just a random guy on the street in Times Square. Okay. I thought that was kind of a fun little addition because he's blown up. He's doing a ton of stuff. He's obviously like one of the biggest YouTubers at the moment. And then Post Malone, who just dropped an album like last week, is in this for like a little bit. He plays the singing Ray, which I think is hilarious because like didn't even notice that was him until I looked at the credits. I was like, oh, duh.
Hannibal Buress voices Genghis Frog.
Yeah, which also like I didn't notice until the end, which was great.
Right. Yeah, some of their names are just funny.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought the whole cast was solid. Yeah, I'm surprised that they shelled out or whatever they shelled out for all of these actors.
Pun intended.
Yeah. Because they all have like 6 lines, as you said. So I would think like that's where a lot of the budget went. But I'm glad.
I mean, also like a lot of these, I think Seth Rogen just has a lot of pull. And if it's like a day's work, I think there's probably an element where you just be like, hey, buddy, you want to come in and be in the new Ninja Turtle movie for like record for like 3 hours and then just head on your merry way?
Yeah, like, can you pay my mortgage for a month and I'll do it? Like, yeah, like, that's what why not? Right? A lot of these people are massive stars, and obviously there's the strike and stuff going on, but like,
this was made before that.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, you know what I mean? Like, if you can get just a little bit of something, you're gonna do it.
Absolutely. Anything else? Otherwise, I think we can dive into our star ratings.
The only thing I guess I would touch on again is the animation is just like it's a mix of like sketches.
It's a little unfinished in some places, which I kind of enjoyed. Like I just find stuff like this so much more interesting looking than something like the Super Mario movie.
Yeah, like that looks good for all intents and purposes, but it's photorealistic, and that's fine. Well, it's just like I'm glad that. Well, you know what I mean. Yeah. This didn't go for that, and it definitely is its own category because it's clearly Into the Spider-Verse inspired, but it doesn't quite go as comic booky. I think all the turtles look really, really good all the time, movement wise, like their shells and stuff. They look like it's an actual shell and not just like a weird costume. And all the I guess, detail on the other mutants looks awesome. Like the Seth Rogen and John Cena play the rhino and the pig respectively, and like the nose ring and the tattoos and all that stuff. It's really well done, even if it's like a little bit blurry, but that's on purpose.
It's got a little more like sort of notebook sketch feel to it at times.
Yeah. So I just wanted to touch on like that's kind of what you're walking into in the animation department in this, and it's good. It's solid.
Yeah,
it sets itself apart.
Well, then we will be right back with our star ratings. All right. I can go first.
Sure.
So I'm giving this 3 stars. I enjoyed myself. Like I mentioned already, it's for the most part, it's funny. The interactions between the characters and their relationships are well done, and animation's cool. Great soundtrack. It did lag a little bit kind of before the third act for me, where I kind of felt like, how much of this is left? It feels like it's sort of running out of steam here, but then it kind of picked up again towards the end. And like I said, all the jokes don't totally land. There's a running bit about milking that I thought like they went back to
too many times,
way more times than they really needed to, which also made me think too. Do you remember that Seth Rogen movie, American Pickle?
Yeah.
There's a joke about milking stuff in that movie too. And I think Seth Rogen might need to talk to somebody about his whatever this milking thing is that he's got going on.
It's just too into it.
Yeah. Or afraid of it.
Or afraid of it. That's true. That's like a nightmare he had that's just recurring, and he's afraid of the aliens coming to milk him. I
think so too.
I'm also gonna give this 3 stars. Oh, sorry. Sounds like we had a little bit of audio. I'm also gonna give this 3 stars. I think the weakest parts of this movie are the plot. I know like I found that the action sequences were good, but the final action sequence I felt was a little bit short and almost shoehorned, as if like, we're coming up on the runtime, we better just get over it quick. And it's really, really fast, and it just kind of happens. I didn't enjoy a lot of there's a lot of like subplots that don't necessarily like, they don't not go anywhere, but they don't serve the main story. Which I thought was kind of weird, but maybe that leaves it up for, more world building and more later on if they're going to do some sequels, which I think would be cool. So I don't want to say that's like a bad thing necessarily, but it's something I noticed that I was like, okay, that could have been a little bit more succinct. But like we said, the acting was good. The animation is amazing. The camaraderie between the 4 brothers is awesome. Love Jackie Chan. And genuinely enjoyed it beyond, part of that theater experience.
Yeah.
So 3 stars. I think it's a good movie. I think you can go see it. I think a lot of people of any age are going to like this. Like you said, anywhere between 8 and we'll go 38, 48. You're going to enjoy the new Mutant Mayhem.
Yeah. So if we watch this again, does one of us need to be that guy just every time we watch this movie now?
Just like in the next room, just screaming at you every time something sort of funny happens.
I'm not going to let you watch this movie peacefully for the rest of our lives.
It's either that or we have to never make noise.
Yeah,
like it has
no
to be
laughing allowed.
Nothing. Yeah.
All right. Well, there you have it. 3 stars from both of us. And I believe it is my turn to put a wrap on the show.
Yep, you've got it.
Forgiveness is divine, but never pay full price for late pizza.